The conference hall on Axiom Prime Station hummed with the usual noise of galactic politics. Doyon sat at the human delegation table, his hands folded calmly on the polished surface. To his left, Yuna reviewed tactical reports on her datapad. To his right, Minho made quiet notes about trade figures that nobody else seemed to care about. This was the 73rd Council session. Doyon had attended as Earth's ambassador. 73 times he had sat in this same seat, presenting human ideas, offering human solutions, and watching alien delegates dismiss them with barely concealed contempt. The Vrelnith representative stood at the central podium, his scaled skin shimmering under the station lights. He was complaining again about mineral rights in the outer reaches. The same complaint he had made for 6 months. The same complaint that could be solved with simple negotiation if anyone bothered to try. Dayin had drafted a solution. It sat in his files, ready to present. A fair distribution system that would give every species access to the resources they needed. He had spent weeks on it, consulting with experts, running economic models, making sure every detail was perfect. The Vrelnith finished his speech with a dramatic gesture. The Kesari delegate clicked her mandibles in approval. The Thornid representative simply watched with her multiple eyes, expression unreadable as always. Doyon raised his hand to speak. The council moderator acknowledged him with visible reluctance. He stood and walked to the podium, carrying his proposal. He had learned long ago to keep his voice level and professional, no matter how frustrating these sessions became. He explained the distribution system, highlighting how it would benefit all parties. He showed the economic projections. He answered questions with patience. The Vrelnith delegate laughed. Not a polite chuckle, but a full mocking laugh that echoed through the chamber. The humans think they understand galactic economics, the Vrelnith said, still chuckling. How charming. How utterly primitive. Other delegates joined in the laughter. Doyon stood at the podium, his proposals still displayed on the screens around the chamber, and waited for the noise to die down. Yuna watched him carefully from their table. She had served in 3 wars before becoming a diplomatic advisor. She knew how to read people. And right now, she could see something shifting in Doyon's expression. The laughter faded. The session continued. Doyon returned to his seat without another word. For 2 more hours, the council argued in circles. The Kesari proposed a solution that would benefit only themselves. The Thornid suggested isolating the disputed region entirely. The Vrelnith demanded everyone else simply accept their claim. Then the Kesari delegate turned her attention to humanity. "We have a proposal," she announced. The human colonies in the Kepler sector should be transferred to Kesari administration. As compensation, Minho stopped writing. Yuna looked up sharply from her datapad. Doyon remained perfectly still. Compensation for what? Doyon asked quietly. For the insult of human presence in regions of space that should be administered by more advanced species. The Kesari replied, 3 colony worlds. A small price for continued council membership. The demand was absurd. Those 3 worlds housed 15 million humans. Families, communities, entire generations who had built lives on those planets. And the Kesari wanted Earth to simply hand them over. Doyon looked at Minho. The economic specialist had gone pale, but was already calculating something on his data pad. After a moment, Minho turned the screen so Doyon could see. The numbers told a clear story. In the last decade, humans had negotiated 17 major treaties that prevented wars. Human mediators had resolved 43 conflicts before they could escalate. Human trade networks moved goods between species that refused to deal with each other directly. Human medical technology had saved billions of lives across dozens of species. And in return, humanity received nothing but contempt. Doyon stood slowly. Yuna and Minho rose with him, understanding what was about to happen without needing to be told. Ambassador Doyan? The moderator said, confused by the movement. Doyan looked around the chamber at the assembled delegates. Species who had relied on human help for generations while treating humans as inferior. Species who took and never once said thank you. Humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council, Doyan said. His voice was calm, clear, and absolutely final. Effective immediately. We wish you well in your future endeavors. The chamber erupted, not in shock or concern, but in laughter. The Vrelnith delegate was practically howling with amusement. The Kasari clicked her mandibles in what might have been approval. Even the usually stoic Thornid seemed pleased. The humans are throwing a tantrum, the Vrelnith announced to general agreement. How predictable. How wonderfully primitive. Doyan gathered his materials. Yuna and Mino did the same. They walked toward the exit with steady, unhurried steps. You will come back, the Kasari called after them. Humans always come back. You need the Council more than the Council needs you. Doyan paused at the doorway. He could have explained what would happen now. He could have warned them about all the systems that would fail, all the networks that would collapse, all the careful work that would unravel without human oversight. But he was done explaining things to people who never listened. Goodbye, was all he said. The three humans left the chamber. Behind them, the laughter continued. Delegates joked about human sensitivity and primitive emotions. They returned to their arguments about mineral rights, confident that nothing important had just happened. They would learn the truth soon enough. Doyun led his team to the docking bay where their ship waited. As they boarded, Yuna finally spoke. They have no idea what they just lost, she said. Minho was already sending encrypted messages to every human settlement in the galaxy. The order was simple. Come home. All human personnel, all human resources, all human support. Everything that humanity had shared so freely would now be withdrawn. Doyan settled into the pilot seat and began the departure sequence. Through the viewport, he could see Axiom Prime Station, a symbol of galactic cooperation. A cooperation that had always been one-sided. No, Doyan agreed. They have no idea. But they will learn. The ship undocked and turned toward Earth. Behind them, the galaxy continued its business as if nothing had changed. In the council chamber, delegates still argued and laughed and made their demands. None of them noticed the moment when everything began to fall apart. None of them realized that the only thing holding their fractured civilization together had just walked out the door, but they would notice soon, very soon, and by then it would be far too late. 3 weeks had passed since the humans left the council. Jihoon sat in the operations center on New Bizan, monitoring galactic communications with growing interest. The screens before him showed what he had expected to see. What he had warned the council would happen if they kept pushing humanity away. War had come to the Vrelnith-Tessari border dot. It started small, as these things always did. A Vrelnith mining ship crossed into what the Kesare claimed as their territory. The Kesari sent a patrol to turn them back. Shots were fired. 3 Kesari died. The Vrelnith called it self-defense. The Kesari called it murder. In the old days, before humanity withdrew, Doyun would have stepped in. He would have reviewed the evidence, spoken to both sides, and found a solution that let everyone save face. The conflict would have ended before it truly began. But Doyan was on Earth now, and humanity was no longer in the business of saving species who had laughed at them. Ji-hun watched the conflict escalate in real time. Vrelnith battle cruisers moved to the border. Kesari defense fleets responded. Both sides issued ultimatums that the other side ignored. Then the shooting started in earnest. What Ji-hun found most interesting was not the battle itself, but what happened around it. The Vrelnath fleet tried to coordinate their attack patterns using standard galactic communication protocols. But those protocols had been designed by humans. They ran on networks that humans had built and maintained, networks that were no longer functioning. Without human translators, the Vrelnath commanders could not understand Kesari battle chatter. Without human communication algorithms, their own fleet struggled to maintain coordination. Ships that should have moved together moved separately. Orders that should have been clear became confused. The same problems plagued the Kesari fleet. Both sides were essentially fighting blind and deaf, unable to properly communicate even with their own forces. Ji-Hoon made notes in his report. He would send it to Earth along with his other observations. The Council had thought humanity's contributions were minor, easily replaced. They were learning otherwise. Admiral Sora received the first request for help on the second day of the war. A Vrelnath hospital ship was caught between the two fleets, unable to reach safety. They sent a distress call asking for human assistance in establishing a humanitarian corridor. SOR read the request twice to make sure she understood it correctly. The Vrelnath wanted humanity to negotiate safe passage for their medical vessel. The same Vrelnath who had mocked human diplomatic efforts for decades. She composed her response carefully, professional, polite, absolutely final. Humanity is no longer a council member. This conflict does not concern us. We cannot assist. The reply she received was desperate. The hospital ship carried 3,000 wounded soldiers. Without help, they would die. SOR felt a moment of sympathy. Then she remembered sitting in council sessions, watching Doyon present brilliant solutions only to be laughed at. She remembered the casual contempt in every interaction. She remembered the Kesari demanding that humans give up their colony worlds. Her second response was shorter. We wish you well in your future endeavors. The Thornid matriarchy tried next. They had remained neutral in the Vrelnath-Kesari War, which meant they had some credibility as mediators. Their diplomats reached out to both sides, offering to broker peace talks. The talks lasted 4 hours before collapsing completely. The Thornid diplomats had trained under human instructors. They knew the basic principles of negotiation. What they did not understand were the thousands of cultural nuances that made negotiation between different species possible. Humans had studied every species in the galaxy. They knew which gestures were insults and which were compliments. They knew when to speak directly and when to be subtle. They knew how to navigate the complex web of honor, pride, and practical necessity that governed interspecies relations. The Thornid knew none of this. And when their lead negotiator accidentally used a gesture that meant your children are worthless in Vrelnath culture, the peace talks exploded into violence. Within 6 hours. The Thornid matriarchy had joined the war on the Kesari side. Now 3 species were fighting, and the conflict was spreading. Nari directed the human colonial authority. From her office on Earth, her job had suddenly become much busier. She was responsible for bringing every human in non-council space. Back home, the recall orders went out to thousands of installations across the galaxy. Human scientists working in Vrelnath research centers. Human engineers maintaining Kesari infrastructure. Human doctors treating plague victims on Thornid worlds. Human teachers, traders, technicians, and diplomats. All of them received the same message. Pack your belongings and return to human space within 30 days. Some protested. A research scientist named Taiwan sent an angry message saying his work on genetic diseases was too important to abandon. Nari sent back a simple question. Did the Vrelnath appreciate his work enough to treat him with basic respect? Taiwan arrived on Earth 2 weeks later. He never sent another complaint. The medical ships were the last to leave. Nari personally oversaw their departure, knowing what it would mean. Human medical techniques were the most advanced in the galaxy. Human doctors had pioneered treatments for dozens of diseases that plagued other species. When the last medical ship left Vrelnith space, their hospital system began to collapse within days. Patients who could have been saved died. Plague containment protocols that humans had established were forgotten or ignored. The death toll climbed. NAR, I felt no satisfaction in this. She was not cruel, but she was done with humanity, bearing the burden of caring for species who gave nothing in return. On New Bizin, Ji-hoon compiled his monthly report. The numbers painted a clear picture of galactic collapse. 17 new conflicts had erupted in various regions. Without human mediators, old grudges turned into new wars. Border disputes that could have been solved peacefully became military confrontations. Galactic trade had dropped by 64%. The Human Commerce Network, which had efficiently routed goods between species for generations, was offline. Species that had received regular food shipments now waited weeks or months. Some waited forever. Pirate activity had increased by 340%. Human patrol routes and security protocols had kept the space lanes safe. Without them, raiders operated freely, preying on merchant vessels. 4 species were facing extinction from diseases that humans had been helping them treat. The medical knowledge existed, but without human doctors to apply it properly, the treatments failed. The Vrelnith economy was in free fall. Their financial systems had been built on frameworks that humans designed. Without human economists to maintain them, the systems were breaking down in ways that Vrelnith could not fix. Ji-hoon sent his report to Earth and sat back in his chair. Through his office window, he could see the thriving colony below. New Bizin had grown by 20% since humanity withdrew from the Council. Human colonies everywhere were experiencing the same boom. It turned out that when humanity stopped spending resources on ungrateful aliens, those resources could be used to improve human lives. Instead, his unit chimed. A message from Admiral Sora. She wanted his assessment of galactic stability. Ji-hoon smiled as he began typing his response. The galaxy was tearing itself apart, and it was all so preventable. All they had to do was treat humans with basic respect. They chose not to. Now, they would live with that choice. 6 months after humanity's withdrawal, Hyunwoo stood before the Earth Council with a data pad full of numbers that told a devastating story. He was the youngest counselor in Earth's government, but he had spent his entire career studying galactic economics. What he was seeing now shocked even him. The collapse is accelerating, he began, displaying charts on the chamber screens. Every metric we track shows the galaxy falling apart faster than our worst predictions. The Earth Council listened in silence as Hyunwoo detailed the catastrophe. 17 conflicts had become 32. Trade volume had dropped from 64% to 81%. Entire regions of space had gone dark, their communication systems too degraded to function. What about famine? Asked one of the senior COUNCILLORs. Hyunwoo pulled up another chart. 4 species are experiencing severe food shortages. 2 more will join them within the month. The Human Commerce Network handled all major food distribution. Without it, they cannot get supplies where they are needed. Can they rebuild the network themselves? They are trying, Hyunwoo said, but they do not understand the underlying algorithms. We designed those systems to be efficient, but also to prevent any single species from dominating trade routes. The species trying to rebuild are only creating routes that benefit themselves. It is making the problem worse. On the other side of human space, Engineer Swa oversaw the final shutdown of the Human Commerce Network. She had helped build this system over a career spanning 20 years. Watching it go offline felt like losing a part of herself, but it had to be done. The network was humanity's creation. It was designed to benefit everyone, to make sure that even poor worlds received the supplies they needed. And the galaxy had responded by treating humans like servants instead of partners.su, I initiated the shutdown sequence. Across the galaxy, routing stations went dark. Trade calculations that had run automatically for decades stopped running. The invisible hand that had guided galactic commerce released its grip. Within hours, shipping companies were reporting problems. Routes that should have taken days were taking weeks. Ships were getting lost. Cargo was being delivered to the wrong destinations, and there was nobody to fix it because the only people who understood the system were humans. And humans were done helping. SUA received a message from a Kasari shipping company. They were offering to hire her as a consultant for an enormous salary. They wanted her to help them rebuild the network. She deleted the message without responding. The first reconciliation attempt came from the Kasari Collective. They sent a small diplomatic ship to Sejong, one of humanity's oldest colony worlds. Ambassador Junho met them in the diplomatic reception hall. Following all the proper protocols, even though he wanted to send them away immediately, the Kasari envoy was young, probably chosen because she had not been part of the council that mocked humanity. She spoke politely about renewed partnership and mutual benefit. Junho listened to the entire pitch without interrupting. When she finished, he asked a simple question. What are you offering humanity in exchange for our help? The envoy seemed confused by the question. We are offering renewed partnership with the Kasari Collective. Access to our markets and technology. You mean the markets that depend on human trade networks to function? The technology that is less advanced than what we already have. The envoy's mandibles clicked in what might have been embarrassment. We are willing to forgive the improper way humanity left the council. Junho had to work hard to keep his expression neutral. They thought humanity needed forgiveness. They still did not understand. Let me be clear, Junho said. Humanity does not need the Kasari Collective. Our colonies are thriving. Our economy is stronger than it has ever been. Our people are happy. We have discovered that we are far better off without the burden of galactic politics. But surely you want to help prevent the suffering happening across the galaxy? We tried to prevent suffering for 70 years, Junho replied. We negotiated treaties, mediated conflicts, and provided aid to species in need. In return, we were mocked and disrespected. The Kasari Collective specifically demanded we surrender colony worlds as compensation for imagined insults. Do you remember that? The envoy looked down at her feet. We remember, Junho continued. Every human remembers. We are done being the galaxy's unpaid servants. If the Kasari Collective wants human assistance, you will need to offer something of actual value. And even then, we might say no. The envoy left Sejong with nothing. Her report back to the collective called humanity inexplicably arrogant and suggested they would eventually come to their senses. The Kasari leadership read the report and decided to wait. Surely the humans were just angry. Surely they would calm down and return to their proper place. They were wrong. On Earth, Defense Minister Jisoo reviewed the military readiness reports with satisfaction. The human defense fleet had undergone a complete transformation in 6 months. For generations, human military resources had been stretched thin. They protected not just human space, but also provided security for council operations, peacekeeping forces, and humanitarian missions. Human ships patrolled trade routes that benefited other species. Human soldiers died in conflicts that were not their own. All of that had stopped. Now every human ship, every soldier, every weapon system focused solely on defending humanity. The result was the most powerful military force humanity had ever fielded. Jisoo had run simulations against every potential threat. Vrelnith battle fleets, Kessari armadas, Thornid war spheres. In every scenario, humanity won decisively, not because humans were naturally better warriors, but because human military doctrine emphasized cooperation, innovation, and adaptability. The same qualities that made them excellent diplomats made them formidable soldiers. And unlike the galaxy's other species, humans now fought only for things they actually cared about. "Are we expecting any attacks?" asked one of Jisu's senior officers. "No," Jisu replied. "The galaxy is too busy fighting itself to threaten us. But if they do come, we will be ready." Back in the operations center on New Bizan, Ji-Hoon watched another government fall. The Vrelnath Empire, which had stood for 3,000 years, had fractured into 6 separate states. Each claimed to be the legitimate government. Each was at war with the others. The empire had relied on human administrative systems to manage its vast bureaucracy. Human efficiency experts had streamlined their government. Human economists had stabilized their currency. Human mediators had prevented the regional tensions that always existed in such a large empire from tearing it apart. Now those tensions had free rein. Ji-Hoon made a note in his report. The Vrelnath would likely spend the next decade fighting among themselves. By the time they achieved any kind of unity, they would be a shadow of what they once were. The irony was not lost on him. The Vrelnath had been the loudest voices mocking humanity's primitive understanding of galactic politics. Now they could not even manage their own empire. Similar collapses were happening everywhere. The Kasari Collective faced internal rebellions as colony worlds stopped receiving supplies. The Thornid Matriarchy had sealed its borders completely, hoarding resources while the rest of the galaxy starved out, and through it all, human colonies prospered. New Sol had become a center of culture and art. New Inchin led the galaxy in technological innovation. New Bizan's economy grew by 30% in a single year. Ji-Hun sometimes wondered if they should feel guilty about the suffering in the galaxy. Then he remembered Do-Yun standing at that podium, presenting a solution that would have prevented this entire disaster, only to be laughed at by species who thought they knew better. They had made their choice. Now they were living with it. And humanity had never been happier. 2 years had passed since Do-Yun walked out of that council chamber. The galaxy he left behind barely resembled the one he remembered. Seo-Jon stood in front of what remained of the Galactic Emergency Council, presenting findings that everyone already knew, but nobody wanted to admit. The Emergency Council had been hastily assembled after the original council collapsed. It met irregularly, when species could spare representatives from their various wars. Today, only 5 species had managed to send anyone. The chamber that once held 50 delegates now echoed with emptiness. "Every system is failing," Seo-Jon said, his voice carrying in the near-empty space. "Every single one." He displayed charts showing the progression of collapse. Medical systems, trade networks, communication protocols, conflict resolution procedures, economic frameworks. All of them had been established or maintained by humans. All of them were breaking down. "The pattern is clear," Seo-Jon continued. Humanity was not just another member species. They were the foundation that everything else was built on. A Vrelnath delegate, representing one of the 6 fractured states that used to be the Empire, spoke up. "Surely we can rebuild these systems ourselves?" Seo-Jon pulled up another chart. "These are the attempts various species have made to recreate human systems. Trade routing algorithms that create infinite loops. Medical protocols that make patients worse instead of better. Communication networks that cannot translate basic concepts between species. Why do they all fail?" asked a Thornid representative. "Because humans did not just build systems," Seo-Jon explained. "They built systems that accounted for how different species think, communicate, and interact. A Vrelnath and a Kasari process information differently. Humans understood both ways and created bridges between them. When other species try to rebuild, they only understand their own perspective." The delegates sat in uncomfortable silence. They were finally understanding what they had lost. Xiaojun had more to show them. He displayed a map of active conflicts. 38 wars currently raged across the galaxy. Before humanity left, the average was 2 or 3 minor disputes at any given time. Human mediators prevented this, Xiaojun said. They understood that most conflicts come from misunderstanding rather than genuine disagreement. They could find the real issues and solve them before fighting started. Former Counselor Vrikish sat in his private office, composing a message to Earth. He had been one of the Vrelneth who laughed when Doyan walked out. The memory brought him shame now. Writing the apology took weeks. It had to acknowledge every insult, every dismissal, every moment of casual disrespect that humanity had endured. It had to be completely honest about the Vrelneth's failures. When he finally sent it, the message took 3 months to reach Earth. The communication networks had degraded so badly that even simple transmissions faced massive delays. On Earth, Yejin almost deleted the message. He worked in the Communication Authority, filtering the constant stream of requests for help that arrived from the galaxy. Most were deleted without being read. Earth had made its position clear. Humanity was done helping species who never appreciated them. But something about this message made him pause. Maybe it was the length. Most requests were short, desperate pleas. This was different. He opened it and started reading. The apology was thorough. Painfully thorough. Vrikish detailed decades of mistreatment, acknowledging how the Council had relied on human work while treating humans as inferior. He admitted that the Vrelneth had been wrong, not just about leaving, but about everything. Yejun forwarded the message to President Minji. Minji read it in her office, overlooking the rebuilt Seoul. The city gleamed with new construction, funded by resources that used to go to galactic aid. She read Vrekish's words carefully, looking for any sign of deception or manipulation. She found none. The apologies seemed genuine. She called a cabinet meeting. Doyan attended, no longer an ambassador, but serving as an advisor to the government. Yuna was there, now heading the defense ministry. Minho ran the economic planning office. He sounds sincere, Minji said, displaying the message for everyone to see. Du Yun read it and nodded. Vrikish was always one of the more reasonable Vrelneth. But being reasonable was not enough when everyone else was mocking us. Do we believe they have learned? Minji asked. Rena, the trade minister, shook her head. They are desperate. Desperation makes people temporarily humble. But what happens when things improve? Do they go back to treating us like servants? They will not improve without our help, Minot observed. The economic models are clear. The galaxy is in a death spiral. Every month, things get worse. Without human intervention, billions more will die. That is not our responsibility, Yuna said firmly. We tried to help. We were mocked for it. Why should we care now? The question hung in the air. Nobody had a good answer. Minji looked at the view of Seoul again. The city was beautiful, thriving, full of happy people living good lives. Human colonies everywhere reported the same thing. Without the burden of galactic politics, humanity had entered a golden age. We do not need them, she said finally. That is what makes this decision difficult. If we needed the galaxy, we would have to swallow our pride and return. But we do not need them at all. Doyan spoke quietly. The question is not whether we need them. The question is who we want to be. Do we help because we expect gratitude? Or do we help because it is right? They had their chance for our help, Yuna countered. They threw it away. I am not suggesting we give them anything for free, Doyan said. I am suggesting we decide what price we want for our help. If we have that conversation, it means we are willing to consider returning. If we are not willing, we should say so clearly. Minji nodded slowly. Before we make any decision, I want complete assessments. Economic impact of returning versus staying isolated, military implications, social effects on our population, everything. The cabinet dispersed to gather information. Doyan remained behind. Do you want to go back? Minji asked him. Doyan thought about the question. He remembered the frustration of those council sessions, the constant disrespect, the way good ideas were dismissed because they came from humans. But he also remembered the work itself, the satisfaction of solving a problem that seemed impossible, the knowledge that his efforts prevented wars and saved lives. I want them to understand what they lost, he said finally. I want them to truly comprehend that humanity is not inferior, that our compassion was strength, not weakness, that they made a terrible mistake. And if they do understand, if this apology is genuine, then maybe we can talk, on our terms, with our conditions. And if they ever disrespect us again, we walk away and never return. Minji smiled. That sounds reasonable. Meanwhile, human colonies continued their golden age. New Inshin announced a breakthrough in quantum computing. New Seoul's art exhibitions were attended by humans from every colony world. New Bizan's universities were training the next generation of scientists and engineers. Children grew up in a humanity that knew its worth. They learned about the council years in history classes, studying how their ancestors had been treated. Those lessons shaped their understanding of the galaxy. Humanity would help again if they chose to, but it would be on human terms. And this time, they would never forget what happened when the galaxy took them for granted. The apology from Rikish was just the beginning. More were coming. The galaxy was finally learning a lesson that should have been obvious from the start. Respect is not given freely. It is earned. And once lost, it is very hard to regain. The delegation arrived at Earth 6 months after Vrikish sent his apology. Doyon commanded the border guard ship that escorted them from the edge of human space to Geneva. He watched the alien diplomats carefully, looking for any sign of the old arrogance. He found none. They looked tired, scared, and desperate. The delegation was smaller than expected. Only 8 species had sent representatives, and none of them were from the original council leadership. These were younger diplomats, people who had not been part of the system that treated humanity so poorly. Their leader was a Kesari named Talara. She was barely 30 standard years old, which made her very young for a Kesari diplomat. Dao Shun learned that most of the experienced diplomats were dead, killed in the wars that consumed the galaxy. Earth is beautiful, Talara said quietly. Looking through the viewport as they descended toward Geneva, Do-Yun followed her gaze. Earth was beautiful. It had always been beautiful, but now it was also prosperous in ways it had never been when supporting the galaxy. We have had time to focus on ourselves, Do-Yun replied. The shuttle landed at the diplomatic complex. President Minji waited inside with her full cabinet. Do-Yun stood to her right, back in a diplomatic role after 2 years of retirement. Yuna stood to her left, in full military uniform, as a subtle reminder of human strength. Tylara led the alien delegation into the chamber. She did not try to shake hands or use any of the usual diplomatic gestures. She simply bowed, a sign of respect in human culture. Thank you for seeing us, she said. Minji gestured to the seats prepared for them. The aliens sat carefully, aware that they were supplicants here, not equals negotiating. Lara presented their case without embellishment. 12 billion dead from conflicts that could have been prevented. Economic systems on the verge of total collapse. Food shortages affecting 42 worlds. Medical crises that would kill billions more without help. We understand now what you were to us, Talara said. We understand what we lost when we drove you away. We are here to ask for your help, not to demand it. Minji asked. We have no position to demand anything, Talara admitted. We can only ask and hope you are more merciful than we were. Minji appreciated the honesty. She looked at Doyun, who gave a small nod. The apologies seemed genuine. The desperation was certainly real. Humanity might be willing to help, Minji said carefully, but it will not be like before. We will not return to being the galaxy's unpaid servants. We understand. Minji pulled up a document on the chamber screens. These are our terms. The first term appeared. Full representation on any galactic governing body with veto power over all major decisions. Tallara read it and nodded. Acceptable. The second term. Complete sovereignty over all human worlds with no exceptions or challenges. Also acceptable. The third term. Formal recognition of humanity's historical contributions with permanent memorials on every council world. We should have done this decades ago, Tallara said quietly. The fourth term. A galactic truth and reconciliation process to document all instances of human mistreatment. Tallara hesitated on this one. Some species may resist admitting their failures publicly. Then those species will not receive human assistance, Minji said simply. I understand. I will recommend acceptance. The fifth and final term appeared. Human oversight of all major interspecies agreements for the next century. The alien delegates reacted to this one. A century was a long time. It meant human authority over galactic affairs for multiple generations. This is a significant demand, Tallara said. It is, Minji agreed, but necessary. The galaxy had millennia to learn how to cooperate peacefully. You failed. Humanity prevented disaster for 70 years. Then you drove us away and everything collapsed within months. Clearly, you need supervision. Tallara looked at her fellow delegates. They had a quick, quiet conversation in multiple languages. Finally, she turned back to Minji. We would like to discuss these terms with our governments. Of course. Take 3 days. The delegation was housed in comfortable quarters with full access to communication systems. Dajun personally ensured their safety, remembering how human diplomats had once been treated in alien spaces. On the second day, Admiral Sora conducted a military demonstration in a nearby system. The human defense fleet showed its capabilities in carefully controlled exercises. New weapons, new tactics, new ships that outperformed anything the galaxy had seen. The message was clear. Humanity was no longer weak. They were no longer the gentle mediators who could be pushed around. Doyun made sure the delegation watched the demonstration. Talara's face grew pale as she realized how powerful humanity had become. You could conquer the galaxy if you wanted, she said quietly. We do not want to, Doyun replied. We never wanted power over others. We wanted respect, cooperation, partnership. The galaxy refused to give us those things. Now we are strong enough to demand them. On the third day, the delegation returned with their answer. Every species they represented had voted to accept the terms. All 5 conditions, no exceptions, no negotiations. There is one question, Tallara said. When you return to help us, will you be like you were before? Will you care about our suffering? It was Doyun who answered. We will help because it is necessary and because you have finally shown genuine respect. But do not mistake our help for weakness. If any species returns to the old ways, if anyone treats humanity as inferior again, we will leave. And next time, we will not return. Ever. I understand, Tallara said. I will make sure everyone understands. The formal agreement was signed the next day. Within a week, the first human ships began moving back into galactic space. But everything was different now. Human mediators arrived at conflict zones with military escorts. Human medical teams operated under human security forces. Human trade specialists worked with human oversight at every level. And everywhere they went, they were treated with respect, Ji-hoon returned to his role coordinating galactic operations, but from a position of authority rather than service. When the Vrelnath government tried to dictate terms for human assistance, he simply denied their request and moved to the next species on the list. The Vrelnath learned quickly. They apologized and accepted human terms. After that, Ji-hoon approved their request. Coordinator after coordinator learned the same lesson. Humanity would help, but only on human terms. Any disrespect, any attempt to return to old patterns, resulted in immediate withdrawal of aid. The galaxy adjusted. Slowly, painfully, but they adjusted. Minji watched the process from Earth, satisfied that they had made the right choice. Humanity was helping again, but not from a position of weakness. They helped because they chose to, because they had the power to demand respect. Years passed. The wars ended, one by one, as human mediators brought combatants to negotiation tables. Trade networks were rebuilt under human supervision. Medical systems were restored with human expertise. The galaxy began to heal. A generation of young aliens grew up learning about the collapse. The 2 years when humanity withdrew and everything fell apart. They learned it as a cautionary tale about the dangers of arrogance and disrespect. On Earth, children learned a different lesson. They learned that their ancestors had been kind and helpful, but they also learned that kindness must be paired with strength. That helping others is noble, but not at the cost of your own dignity. Doyon eventually retired for real, spending his final years writing a history of the council years. His book became required reading in every human school. It ended with a simple message: help others when you can, but never forget your worth, and never let anyone convince you that compassion is weakness.